go, I'm a bulldog.
Hello, DawgNation, and welcome to Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. This is our special bye-week edition of Before the Hedges, and bye-week is not only an opportunity for Georgia to fix what we saw last weekend, but it's also a chance for them to get back on the recruiting trail.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things where I think you look at this season and when does Georgia get an opportunity? Obviously, I think coaches will start slipping out the door maybe Thursday, Friday to go see key prospects. And I think this is an opportunity for not only Georgia to kind of visit their core commitments, but also start working on 2026, Kaylee, and then also maybe trying to go after those still remaining undecided 2025 targets. One thing, though, Georgia can't go too hard in the paint with it because you're only allowed a certain amount of visits per recruit, especially the Kirby visit. He only gets one.
So more on that later, but here's what we've got going on today's Before the Hedges. DawgNation conversations are back. We've got a big one in store for you today with five-star D lineman Elijah Griffin. Of course, we'll have our quick five when we get into the who does Georgia need to see this week on the recruiting trail. Then our time machine is back, and this time it's the man of the season, I would say, Jalon Walker. Then we'll do our Mansell's details with our viral class plays, as well as we've got our Dawg of the month. That's right. We've stepped it up. It's going to be our Dawg of the month. Then, of course, our staples with our question of the week and our class breakdown. But first, let's start with this. You had the chance to see Elijah Griffin this past Friday. Savannah Christian came all the way up, played Fellowship Christian, got the win 28-7. Before we get into the conversation, what's the one thing that DawgNation needs to pay the most attention to when we see this happen?
Well, first of all, here's what you don't need to pay attention to. And this is I think this is great. It makes you want to laugh. I know it's a thing people notice on when reporters go visit recruits, especially at games. Everybody pays attention to the gloves, what type of gloves they're wearing. First of all, and this is hilarious, Elijah Griffin wore some Oregon gloves. And Oregon's not even in his final three. Like, I guess he wanted to rock some neon yellow. I guess maybe. You know what happens with a lot of people? They just simply reach into their locker, reach into their traveling bag, and just pull out a pair of gloves. Sometimes they got so many of them. And I think he wore Oregon gloves. It was kind of in a driving rain. And I think the big thing, Kaylee, was the matchup didn't materialize where it was five-star Josh Petty for Fellowship Christian going against five-star defensive lineman Elijah Griffin. Elijah had a couple of tackles for losses. He wasn't over the top impactful on the game, but still, you kind of see the reasons why he's rated as a five-star.
I certainly think this DawgNation conversation has been long overdue. So here's Elijah Griffin on his performance and where things stand with the University of Georgia.
Elijah, man, how do you think you played today?
Honestly, I think I dominated. I had a lot of TFLs. My team, we had a lot of sacks together as a defense. It was shutout, ultimately a shutout. The only touchdown they scored was on that kickoff. So, we shut them out and we got the job done.
When Griffin and Savannah Christian faced Fellowship Christian last week, some folks wanted to see Griffin lined up against five-star Georgia Tech commit Josh Petty, but that didn't really happen.
To be honest, not really, unless it was like a double team. Obviously, I stood my ground, and no shots in. He's a great player, great player, great player. He's developing well. He's gonna have a great future wherever he decides to go, which I think Georgia Tech. Ultimately, he decided, so he's gonna do great things.
How did people try to scheme up you and Dame on the same side? I mean, what kind of blocking schemes are you guys seeing this year?
There's a lot of double teams on me since I'm inside. If you try to double team him, you leave, number 52 Isaiah Redmond open one-on-one. If you double team him, they leave me one-on-one. We're all gonna win. So, if you double team Redmond, you got Logan. So it's kind of hard to, do that. So.
Elijah, I got to ask. I mean, a lot of reports are coming out now. I know you're down there in the Coastal Empire, but you're thinking about visiting Georgia for an official visit?
Yes, sir.
Have you had any more thoughts or clarity on, like, if that might be when you decide around that visit, around your birthday, or what's the latest on that?
No, sir. I haven't fully decided if that's what I want to do. I just a date that I had set in mind, and just go from there.
Is it possible? Is it possible?
It's always a possibility. It's always a possibility.
What's your thinking right now with Georgia? How do you feel about them? I know you still got an official 3, I guess. Is that the way we should articulate it?
Yes, sir, 100%. USC, Miami, Georgia, they all have a fair shot at me. So, I'm just praying about it, asking God to guide me through it, because this is a hard and very long process. So, I'm just trying to make the right decision. What's
the message from Georgia, and what's the feeling you get from Georgia right now?
It's ultimately a great program. Every time I go up there, I have a blast, whether it's that it was Coach Sky or, the individual, like with the players and stuff like that. We all have a great relationship, because it all started in the 8th grade. So, I've been up there so many times. It's just like second nature, if that makes sense.
What did you learn about the Dawgs from the Clemson game? I saw you up there in the stands way up high, man. You were like you were plugged in a little bit.
Yes, sir. I thought Clemson was about to put on a show, but I guess they just gave up. They couldn't handle it anymore. So but that defense stopped Clemson's offense. Clemson's got to get it together.
Elijah, do you plan on seeing any more visits scheduled? Is the only visit you have scheduled right now the Georgia one on October 12th?
I wanted to, maybe eventually hit a USC game, Miami game for sure, but that'd probably be like later on, like maybe November, something like that. Who knows? I'm not sure yet.
Elijah, I know you probably know the reason why it would be Georgia if you did choose Georgia. What would that reason be? Like if you did eventually become a Dawg, what do you think would be the biggest factor there?
Just relationships and, my heart, just following my heart and making sure that if I come there, I get a good education and just focus on getting out there in 3 years and go to the NFL and dominate.
Is the NIL piece something you think about? How do you look at the NIL piece, man? I know everybody's going to offer it to you. I had the same conversation with Justice. We all know you guys are going to get it. How big of a factor is that going to be for you?
It's not really a factor. I'm not really chasing money at the end of the day. I mean, obviously, college football is now a business, so you got to look into it for that aspect. But that's not really what I'm chasing. I'm just chasing a great education and a school that I love.
What's the communication like with Georgia these days? Do you talk on a certain day? Do you text a lot with them? What kind of communication did they give you now, kind of in the stretch run of your recruitment?
I talk to them mostly every day. Coach Scott, Coach Coop, Coach LeBlanc, Coach Smart. Yeah, I talk to them all the time. So, yeah.
Last question for you. What's the message like from Coach Smart? What's the communication like with that?
He just, he just talks to me about, how life is going, how my family is doing, just the basics, whether that's not football at all, if that makes sense. He's just a down-to-earth guy. He's never changed throughout this whole time, meeting him since the 8th grade. And he's always been so genuine.
Elijah, man, I know you got a long ride back, man. Thank you for your time, sir.
No, I appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Of course.
So here's what I love about what you did here with Elijah Griffin. I like that he's taking his time, and he's obviously taking it very seriously. I feel like in this post-NIL era, it's very rare to see somebody wait out this time, never been committed anywhere else. But I think in watching that, the one thing that stands out to me is when he's talking about what it's been like with Georgia. He says it's second nature. I mean, he's had an offer from them since 8th grade. He's so familiar with this program, and you can't help but notice when he's talking about him, he's got that little smirk on his face, Jeff.
So this is what's crazy, Kaylee. We should probably, I don't know if DawgNation should have celebrated a memento or something like that, but he was offered in September of 2020. That was before he started that was when he was in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And I believe it was like September the 15th of 2020, right around that time. So right around this time when he was in the 8th grade, before he really did anything, before he even really knew who it was, Georgia offered him. And we've talked about before how Kaylee, like, he has a tattoo. And like he lost some people very close to him, and he has a tattoo that captures that and memorializes that. But it's also, he thinks of that same date because that's when Georgia offered him, and his world changed. There's a lot of stuff to talk about with Elijah. I thought it was very interesting. He said USC, Miami, Georgia. Those his final 3. Everybody's got a fair chance. But as what has been reported, and we've reported on DawgNation.com, is that he's going to take his official visit to Georgia. He hasn't seen Georgia yet. On his birthday weekend, and that's the Mississippi State weekend. And I don't know, Kaylee, I think that, whether this is a causal effect or something like that, but he goes to Georgia for a weekend when he wants to have a good time and celebrate his birthday. That's got to mean some pretty good things. I asked him, I know some people that they always like to read between the lines and scan those quotes and stories. Well, I think you can just learn a lot about maybe how Elijah Griffin feels about his timeline by just looking at his face when he answers a lot of those questions. I know it sounds like he's really trying to hold cards a little bit and, God bless him for that. He deserves the right to do so, but it also seems like there's really a true warmth there with the University of Georgia.
I think it also speaks volumes, the fact that they're in contact with him almost every single day. Not only does that say a lot about him as the player and the talent that he has, but it also says a lot about the Georgia recruiting staff to me and how bad they want him and how far they're willing to go to make sure he knows that he's still important after all this time. Yeah,
I mean, like, I would say Elijah would probably be a great candidate to visit this week if he didn't have a bye week. It's pretty funny. Savannah Christian, the #1 team in the new GHSA class A to 3A. That's the new private schools division. And they're looking pretty strong. They probably look like the state title contender there, aside from the #1 ranking. But they've got a bye week this week. And then they come back to Atlanta to face Blessed Trinity, who gave Milton a heck of a game this past weekend. And we all know David Jacobs, and I think Kaylee Mansell smiling really big because she's going to get to see that game and be a part of that game on the Peachtree game of the week, Peachtree TV game of the week. So it's 2 straight trips to Atlanta. And Kaylee, Atlanta is very emotional to the Savannah Christian football team because that's where they lost in the Mercedes-Benz in the state championship game a year ago. So they've got a certain type of feeling about Atlanta. It's business. It's structured. It's just mean. They want to have happy memories in the state of in the city of Atlanta and the state of Georgia. And you know, it's a big time trip from Savannah to go all the way up there as well. And you know, the one thing about Elijah is I want people to just kind of, like this play right here, for example. Everybody expects Elijah to make a play like that all the time. And I'll be honest, he doesn't. He doesn't. He's getting doubled a lot. Now he's collapsing pockets and everything else like that. But like, you know, he's not that game record that everybody's going to think when they see the #1 defensive lineman in the country, #4 overall prospect. He is a game record, but he's not Jalen Carter back there where he's going to have a game with 4 sacks and 6 tackles for losses. Now, he might be throwing bodies around because he does that very well, and he's catching a lot of doubles, which makes his teammates on the defensive line, makes things go a lot better for him. But he's got constant blocking attention. He's had that every season of high school football. But there's a great respect there for Elijah. He does play some both ways. There was some snaps he had against Fellowship Christian in that game where he came in and ran some offense. He was like a tackle when they got into power situations and everything. But again, Elijah Griffin, I'm gonna not try and break some news here, but that's the #1 top target for this week. He's the #1 defensive lineman in the country, and I'm glad we got a chance to have another DawgNation conversation with him right here on Before the Hedges. So you can watch the film, you can listen to the conversation, but one thing that we try to do on Before the Hedges is bring you the things that maybe you don't get the opportunity to see. You actually got the chance to talk to his teammate, who is also a 5-star defensive lineman in the class of 2027. Yeah. LaDamian Guyton, who also has an offer from Georgia, is the #1 player in the class of 2027. What insight did you get from him about Elijah? Well, I mean, I think one of the things he's doing, Kaylee, is he's paying close attention to how Elijah Griffin has handled it. Yeah. And he's almost got like a little roadmap mentor in front of him for the way to handle it and like how not to get too stressful, how not to get too worked up. Guyton, and I mean, folks, he is the absolute real deal. I mean, he is the #1 player in the country for 2027. He is an edge rusher. And I'm going to be honest with you, Kaylee, in some ways you will watch Elijah Griffin on the same field with LaDamian Guyton, and you will not, although it sounds kind of unorthodox, you will walk away from some of those games thinking, okay, now who's the better player? Who's the more talented player? I mean, he's already drawing comparisons to one of his position coaches there, Kaylee, at Savannah Christian, compared him to Khalil Mack. He had a great quote you'll see in a DawgNation.com story pretty soon about LaDamian Guyton. They call him Dame, and he said he reminds him of Khalil Mack, and he's just like a big, furious tsunami type of arms and mean and physical and gritted teeth and legs and gloves and hands. And he just kind of swallows up quarterbacks. You see that. These are great clips. I think you walk away from it, you get motor, you get bend, you get relentless. Look how far he comes around that edge after he made that offensive tackle look silly. And there's a nastiness to LaDamian Guyton, and in some ways, He is the more aggressive, the more physical player right now on a majority of snaps than even Elijah Griffin. So he is really, I know, folks, you're going to say 2027, too far away, not going to pay any attention to it. But you should pay attention to LaDainian Guy.
Is he our way too early top target for the class of 2027?
You know what's so great about that? The game you're going to see with him in Blessed Trinity is because him and David Jacobs Jr., DJ Jacobs at Blessed Trinity, who's also an early 5-star, they're going to be on the same field.
Ooh. And
you might have the early 2 of the top 5, way too early top targets for the class of 2027 matching up and going at it. And we all know Mr. Jacobs, the young Jacobs at Blessed Trinity. That is the son of former Georgia great defensive lineman, and I know a Mark Richt favorite for all time, David Jacobs. Mark Richt, Coach Richt, is actually the godfather for DJ Jacobs at Blessed Trinity. So I tell you what, folks, you guys worry about pass rush, you worry about havoc, you worry about getting on the Kentucky quarterback, getting all these quarterbacks. You roll those two guys into the class and into the Georgia football program, it's gonna feel like to me having like 2 Azeez Ojulares or 2 Nolan Smiths on the field at the same time.
All right, really quick, you can give me percentage or scale of 1 to 10 after your conversation where things stand now. What is your Jeff confidence scale in Elijah Griffin being a future Dawg?
It just feels like it's going to happen, Kaylee. And I don't know. People love to hear the predictions, and I'm gonna be honest. Predictions are really just a snapshot. Like, you can come away from an experience thinking, I think that guy's not going to go to Georgia, or I think that guy's going to go to Georgia. And you can be totally dead on right. But you know what? Other stuff happens. It's not just NIL. It's a feeling. These are impressionable young men. But for those that always are happy right now with the rhetoric that it certainly feels like Georgia's in a good spot with Elijah Griffin, I think that's the case. And I think that Georgia is going to do everything they can in this era to win the Elijah Griffin recruitment. Now you got to just wait for the variables. You got to wait if he takes that official visit and he feels it, or if he's got some honey words poured into his ear by USC or Miami, getting him to hold off and take it a little bit longer. The one thing I'll stress is it feels like Elijah Griffin is taking too long, but he's not. This is the same recruiting template we were used to until about a couple of years ago. It's not even old school. It's kind of like 2021, 2022. He's doing things on his own accord. He's doing it the Frank Sinatra my way, and he's going to take it out the way he wants to. But really, although it seems like he's taking forever, it's really not. I mean, guys, this is not too far long ago when these guys took that thing all to February, and then they took that thing to December, the middle of December. So for all these headlines and all these really clicky stories right now about Elijah, the fact that he could potentially make his decision in the middle of October, it actually kind of feels still not too late for me.
So in just a minute, we're going to do our 5 recruits that UGA needs to visit on the recruiting trail during bye week. But first, let me remind you that here on Before the Hedges, it is brought to you by Kroger, and it's tailgate season. So Kroger has all of your MVPs for this tailgate season, whether it's the chips and snacks or the cold drinks. For cheersing or party trays to make it an easy week, visit your local Kroger, which you can do it in-store or online, or you can go to Kroger.com and order for delivery. Kroger makes game day and tailgating easy for you, so make sure to check out Kroger or Kroger.com. With that, here on Before the Hedges, we couldn't do a show without our quick 5. All right, 5's up. It's time for the 5 recruits that Georgia needs to visit on the recruiting trail, starting with number 1, class of 2026, 5-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson out of Grayson High School. You want to get to in-state, guys. It's a perfect week to do this because Grayson's going to play Grovetown this Friday. They got to get this guy.
Yeah, I think this is a time, Kaylee, where 2026s, it's never too early to start talking to 2026s, especially a priority guy like Tyler Atkinson. Atkinson's facing Grovetown. Now, that's out of the Augusta area, but I think Schumann, of course, there's a couple places he could go. He could go see Marietta High School and Anthony Cruraw. He could go visit a lot of other places to kind of try and find maybe a linebacker for the 2025 class. But I think this is a week where coaches need to be out on the road and get out on the road because of the bye week. And certainly, everybody's like, wants to make sure the 2025 class is very much taken care of and supported and seen, and make sure those committed guys stay committed. But never too early to try and improve your stock with Tyler Atkinson. I think, you and I talk about it, they're way too early for 2026. I often feel like it's very hard for me to put anybody else as somebody more important than the extremely talented linebacker at Grayson High School.
Yeah, and this is a Glenn Schumann type guy. He's got his name all over it. But now let's continue with the 5-stars in the class of 2026. Love that we're having some 2026s on here. We got to go out of state for this one. This is Jackson Cantwell, the 5-star offensive tackle out of Nixa, Missouri, the number 2 national player overall for the class of 2026. Look at this, 6'7.5". 300 pounds. I think he's worth crossing some state lines for. Yeah,
it's one of those where Coach Searles could definitely get in a fight. He's going to be in a fight with schools like Nebraska, Missouri. Everybody expects Missouri to be a heavy NIL contender in his home state. But the Dogs are in it. He's already scheduled visits to see Georgia. I believe he's going to be in for the Auburn game this fall. He's told me kind of candidly that without making too big of an announcement around it, he does feel like Georgia will get an official visit. We've written before about the connection there to Reese Hoffa. His father, Jackson Cantwell's father, was an Olympian. I believe he won a silver medal. And he trained a lot with Reese Hoffa. They were both throwers in the Olympics. And, man, Jackson's already a national level. I think he's broke sophomore high school records for throwing the shot. He also throws the discus. He's a dual state champion in those things. And, Kaylee, I don't know if you saw this or like you have something for us, but 2 things about last week with Jackson Cantwell for his game last week. Number one, I don't even know the story for this, but I can't wait. Next time I talk to Jackson, I'm going to find it. He comes running out on the field last week with a Waffle House flag.
Oh, I'm sold.
Waffle House flag. Sold. And I guess that has something to do with the linemen carry the Waffle House flag because they're going to pancake guys or something like that because you can get waffles at Waffle House. But also in that same game, he did the glove action. He wore a pair of Georgia gloves against their opponent last week, and he actually tagged a lot of Georgia coaches when the photo started making its round around social media.
Regardless, Waffle House NIL deal incoming. Don't waste the opportunity. It's perfect. So bye week is also a good time not just to go see new guys, but also to revisit the ones that have already been in the class. I think this is a good time to maybe go visit 4-star wide receiver Jalon Taylor, an out-of-state guy, which you can't just drive up the road and go see. Of course, out of Geneva, Illinois. Based on what we've seen in his viral class plays, he's been playing phenomenal. I think they might need to go revisit him just to show him some love.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pick right there because it's one of those where it's going to be hard for Georgia to get to outside Chicago. Geneva, Illinois, it's on the west side, kind of a suburb of Chicago. And Talon's playing well, and I would say he's the number 1 receiver in this class. And, of course, Georgia fans, I'm sure they're always never too eager for Georgia to add a 5-star level type talent. Talon is a top 60, top 70 overall prospect. And they got 2 bye weeks. There's another one before Florida. But I feel like this might be a good one just to make sure that you keep those ties very strong. Kaylee, I think the ties are very strong. I think Georgia's already got Mother Taylor, Venus Taylor, very well locked down. She really sees her son thriving at Georgia. She likes the culture at Georgia. So that's very impressive. But I know schools are going to try. Ohio State is still fancying themselves, trying to recruit him a little bit too. So I think the more often you can go see Jalon Taylor, just to have a James Coley up there supporting him or whatever, I think that's a good thing to do.
So as we've seen in recent weeks, you truly cannot get enough defensive linemen, which is why I think this is a good week to check in with Chase Linton, the former Rutgers commit, 4-star defensive lineman out of North Atlanta. He's going to play South Forsyth this week. We've got to have more guys on the defensive line. So,
Kaylee, this is a good topic here because some schools are not going to let down. They're not going to just let Georgia have it. Last week, I thought it was really, really interesting. Everybody's trying to do Kirby Smart things. Last weekend, not only look at this, Rutgers coach Greg Schiano was into the Atlanta area. He took a helicopter over to North Atlanta's practice field and landed the helicopter on the practice field and came to visit. Of course, he was committed to Rutgers, and everybody thinks, college football recruiting food chain. When Georgia jumps in, Rutgers is just going to all right, you caught us. No, Schiano's going to try and dig his heels, try to hunker down, and try to get him. And not only did Greg Schiano do that, Lincoln Riley, who was also in the state of Georgia last week, he came by, I'm told, and paid a visit to North Atlanta High School as well, because Lincoln Riley just loves to fight, apparently, in the state of Georgia.
I mean,
and he was on the sidelines for the Carrollton game. They had a bye week, and he got to see Shamar Arnaud. He got to see Julian Juju Lewis, and he also got to see Xavier Griffin for the Gainesville-Carrollton game. So you had Lincoln Riley. When have we ever seen this, by the way, a little side road here in Georgia high school football? When in the world has the head coach of the USC Trojans been on the sidelines on a Friday night in Georgia watching 3 USC commitments play? That's very rare.
And then at halftime, he comes to Douglas County and Beaufort to watch Jaden Perlotti and Jamie Johnson, 2 more USC commits. It was bizarre.
That was very bizarre. He picked a good time. They was looking at all of his Peach State products right there.
All right, let's quit the Lincoln Riley talk. Let's get to our last one on the quick 5. Number 5, it's got to be a 5-star. It's got to be 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry, still in the midst of the battle. I think this is a guy that you can't show him enough love. You've got to continue to show him the recognition, continue to watch him play. Manchester is going to play cross-county rival Chapel Hill on Friday night. I think this is the perfect opening for UGA to remind him, like, hey, we're still in this. We're watching. We want you.
Kaylee, that's a good one. I think a lot of Dawg fans will be rooting for Trey Scott to be in Manchester this weekend. And, the thing with Terry, the reason why, we mentioned Elijah Griffin. If you're just joining the show right now, Elijah Griffin was part of our DawgNation conversation earlier in the show. But Trey Scott's already been to see Elijah Griffin already this fall for a game. And I think it's Justice Terry's turn. I mean, you do have the 2 bye weeks. I do expect perhaps Kirby might even maybe save his visit for December, perhaps, when getting closer to the signing period or whatever. But certainly you can do everything you can to endear yourself to Mr. Terry. And I think seeing Travion Scott, Coach Trey Scott, pay a visit to Manchester, maybe it's earlier in the day, Kaylee. Maybe it's not for his game, but I think that would be well served.
That is our quick 5 here on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Jalon Walker, that dude has been unreal. So I think it's time we took a look back at the past and see how he got to the University of Georgia. This is Time Machine. So I did a little background research on Jalon Walker. I know how to use the internet.
There you go.
Crazy, right? He was a 5-star prospect out of North Carolina. I didn't realize that he was an out-of-state kid. He was the number 26 player overall and also a 3-sport athlete. And he also played tight end, played both ways for his high school. But I want to know more about the recruiting battle. How did he end up being a Dawg, especially one from out of state?
Good stuff there, Kaylee. Google serves you well. If all the CNN fact checkers or whatever that want to do that for Before the Hedges, I think Kaylee would pass the fact check test right there. 2
free plugs.
So, I'm sorry. Well, you're going to get another plug in here too. We might set a record. Brandon Adams is like punching at the sky right now, or slam dunking a tin of mints into a trash can or something like that. But. So I got to start with this. I remember the first time I talked to Jalon Walker. I hung up the phone and I said, and Kaylee, this very rarely happens, because one of them just makes me go, wow. Like, Georgia is recruiting this guy. And I was like, Georgia has to get this guy for so many reasons. Maybe the one regret I will think about Jalon Walker's career, and of course, I bet if you took a poll among DawgNation right now, they'd be like, might be the most popular player on the team right now. Jalon, there's so much. There's like, let's just crank open the time capsule right here. So Jalon's father was the head coach of Division II Catawba College. His father was a head football coach. Already checks a major box right there. Number 2, Jalon Walker, while he was in high school, worked at a Chick-fil-A. Every time I go to Chick-fil-A, I kind of think sometimes, oh man, can you imagine seeing a 5-star behind the delivery line, or maybe a 5-star coming around and you need any more ice in your lemonade, Miss Mansell? He's the type of guy that fits into a Chick-fil-A ad. And then you've got the incredible jaw-dropping athletic ability. I think Georgia, it really came down to Georgia and Clemson. There was a really strong connection between Malachi Starks and Jalon Walker. And really, they ended up being quick roommates and quick boys once they got to Athens. It's crazy to think that they've already been in Athens for 3 seasons. This is their 3rd season. But it gets so much better. Jalon Walker wanted to be an orthodontist when he was in high school. He wanted to straighten teeth, and I think he tried to knock out a few of Brock Vandegrift's teeth against Kentucky at a Kroger Field on Saturday, but a little bit more here. So Jalon Walker really came down to Georgia, Clemson. I think Venables moving on kind of really increased the chance here. Schumann really prioritizes Georgia. The family really got a chance to love Georgia, but you think of all those things, and like I said earlier, maybe my one regret is Jalon is so well-spoken, such a great ambassador to the program. You see Georgia doing leadership things with him as their representative on some SEC panels and some SEC player committees, but of all those things about Jalon, he probably is going to be so stinking good this year that he'll go and be a 1st or 2nd round draft pick in the NFL because he's going to test out the wazoo at the NFL Combine. And that will mean he will never get a chance to go to SEC Media Days and represent the Dogs at something like that because he is absolutely the guy you want as your ambassador for your program with the media and also just among the fans. He is such an aggressive player, so physical. Kaylee, he did something in high school I think we will never see again. He was in the midst of COVID, so the state of North Carolina backed up their fall football season, and they held it during the spring. Jalon Walker wins the state championship, North Carolina state championship for Salisbury High School, the Hornets, in the spring. Now get this, he was a basketball player as well. He is literally practicing basketball for a couple hours every afternoon after school and then practicing football on the same day and vice versa. So you're thinking about the type of athlete that could be on a basketball team. They made the North Carolina State playoffs at the same time practicing in the midst of a state championship season in the spring. And this was his junior year before he made it to Georgia. And then he had his senior football season later that fall. But you think about all those things in the Jalon Walker story, and all that stuff sticks out. It's all so good. You couldn't ask for a better human being to represent the University of Georgia. And, I mean, when you go back in the time machine with Jalon Walker, you're going to find a lot of good stuff.
I'm also excited to look to the future and see what the future holds for him because the way he's playing right now, I don't mean to go Carson Beck tattoo right here, but it looks like the sky might be the limit for him.
Great guy, great dog, great family. And, I mean, like, think about that. Chick-fil-A kid, had career goals, orthodontist, dad's a college football coach. You want to talk about if Glenn Schumann sits in his linebacker mad scientist film room and sits there and has his create a player like the NCAA football game for the perfect Georgia linebacker. He even pass rushes, Kaylee. Led Georgia in sacks last year. I think I'm gonna get dinged if I don't mention all the amazing things that Jalon Walker has done for Georgia.
So that was our blast from the past, but now it's time to go back to the present because it's time for some Mansell's details, starting with the viral class plays that we got from this past Friday. Now the first one is a little bit special because it was called by our very own Cody Chathens. Here's Landon Roldan. Make sure you listen to the call.
The offensive coordinator for the Dragons. We'll see what he draws up here. It's Gavin Markey and a pistol. Going to fake, going to throw it deep. The ball's picked off. It's Landon Roldan who's picked it off. He's going back the other way. You see the 4.3 speed. He's gone. Touchdown. Pick 6.
Look at Cody. That 4.3 speed.
Listen to Cody. Now, we needed a Limp Bizkit reference in there because Roldan was rolling down the sideline. But I'm going to tell you this. Cody's just going to seep his way and make every piece of DawgNation video content better, just like he did right there. I'm still going to stick with calling him the elevator for a few more weeks, but love the call. He got in the name. He got in the excitement, and then he got in that 4.3 speed as well for the North Oconee standout.
Yep, and the Landon Roldan and North Oconee get the win over Jefferson 35-0. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to our next one right here. We talked about him on the Quick 5. This is Talon Taylor. You'll see him over there in the corner. He's going to cut behind, give him a little toss, watch him break 1, break 2, break 3 right there. He's going to get stopped, but, I mean, just the athleticism radiating off of him is undeniable.
Talented Talon Taylor. That's what you got to think of when you see him. He gets a little kind of, Kirby would call it an extended handoff, I guess. He comes around on the flare action. And listen, when he gets to Georgia, if he breaks 2 or 3 tackles, he's going to be celebrating in the end zone. He won't have to get through a wall of players right there. And he also had another highlight where he got in the end zone. I think he had about 30 yards in receiving, but also scored as Geneva improved to 3-0 on the season.
In our next class play, we've got 2. This is going to come from Tyler J. Williams, someone that we haven't really seen as much in these plays, but I mean, gosh, making it look easy. It goes 30, 20, 10, touchdown. They couldn't even keep the camera up with him. He was moving so fast.
He calls it, I think his handle on social media is TJ Go Crazy, and he certainly went crazy on this highlight right there. I mean, there is stuff here coming about Tyler. Tyler's already had a big game. He has moved to Armwood High School, a bigger high school in the state of Florida, for his senior year, and he's already having a great early start to his senior year. And I mean, some of the things we've heard from coaches across the state of Florida is just amazing. I know one of his coaches said he is the hardest dude to tackle in the state of Florida. He even, had to use a lot of some Saturday morning comic strip language in his tweet because he had to include all those ellipses and grids and hashtags and stars, because you can't say those things on X, unless you're a political candidate, I guess. But he said he's out there with a crowbar in his hands, knocking people away, stuffing it down the face of a defender, making sure they don't tackle him. You saw that crowbar he whipped out right there. Tyler J. Williams, one of Georgia's wide receiver commitments in the class of 2025.
And I believe that he had 2 highlights that were so good we couldn't ignore the other one. I believe we've got one more Tyler J. for you. Yep, right here. So quick, Jeff. I don't think I've realized the speed that he has. Again, camera has to go wide shot right there. They can't keep up with him.
It's one of those things, Kaylee, where, you watch Georgia's receivers right now and you go, does Georgia have a 10 receiver? Do they have a 9.5 receiver? Kaylee, I don't know. And maybe that's probably the reason why the program or the offense maybe sputtered a little bit last Saturday night in Lexington. But they're going to get more of them. They're going to get, I think Georgia's receiving core has a lot of 8.5s maybe, but they're going to get a lot of playmakers, a lot of guys, Kaylee. You see Roldan, you see Talon Taylor, and now you see Tyler J. Williams. That's 3 of the 4 members of the wide receiving class for Coach Coley right now. And here's what they do. They're great after the catch. They're great in what football looks like right now. Short pass, get it in the hands of your playmaker, get it blocked up, and let's see him make a play with his ability after that. You got a lot of guys that are great after the catch. You got a lot of guys that are explosive. They put their foot in the ground and they just go. They take off. They find a different gear. And Tyler J. Williams is one of those dudes.
We're officially 1 month into high school football season, so we had to elevate things here on Before the Hedges. No Dog of the Week. Instead, it's going to be our Dawg of the Month.
I'm a big dog, no leash. You all bark, no teeth. That's a whole lot of wins on me. That's a whole lot of wins on me.
All right, it's Todd Robinson. He's listed. He's going to be an athlete for Georgia, but he's the quarterback at Valdosta. 5 games, 950 passing yards, 11 passing touchdowns, 305 yards rushing, and 6 rushing touchdowns. So he's got 17 touchdowns on the year in 5 games. Oh, and by the way, Valdosta's 5-0 right now with Todd Robinson as their quarterback.
I tell you, folks, you got a great year so far, and you got a dog. When you have Kaylee Mansell out of breath because she has to roll through all those lines and lines of stats. Again, Kaylee, this is a guy, look at all the game, look at him flinging that thing around. True dual threat action. He's about a 4.4, low 4.4 speed. He's going to be a DB at Georgia. He's going to be most likely the guy that gets an early shot at star for Georgia. He's physical, he's big, but look at how special he is with the ball in his hands. And Kaylee, let me give you one of the reasons why I love this pick for Dog of the Month. Not only has he got the stats, but there's growth here. And let me tell you why. Last year, Kaylee, he only threw for about 1,000 and something yards. He's already got that through 5 games. He set the goal. He told me personally, he said, I'm going to throw for 2,000 and I'm going to run for 1,000. And not only that, he's got 11 passing TDs. Kaylee, you know how many he had all of last year? He had 9. He's already eclipsed his career high for passing TDs in the first half of his senior season. He's a game breaker. He's exciting to watch. Kaylee, Valdosta went down to Ribault, Florida last week. 2 weeks ago. And they went on the road, long, big road trip. And then last Friday night, they went up to South Gwinnett. They took on the Comets, another undefeated team. It was a battle of unbeatens. Todd Robinson led his dudes to the win. And I think Dog of the Month action, you want to talk about a dog, you want to talk about who we feel is the best one of the month with some pretty stiff competition.
Absolutely.
I got to give that dog to that dog, Todd Robinson.
We had a long car ride back from Kentucky. We sat there, we debated, we went through all the stats, and I mean, Todd Robinson just jumped off the page. Therefore, Todd Robinson, you are our first ever Dog of the Month, rightfully so. And that is Mansell's Details here on Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Let's talk some more high school football for a second. What's the game that's on your radar?
I'll be honest, Kaylee, this one is not going to be 5 stars in terms of if this was a Hollywood motion picture. It seems like a lot of the best players in the state their teams and programs are on the bye. We got so many candidates for the September 27th weekend in the state of Georgia for the really crazy games. But I think I see a pretty decent game. North Gwinnett. Now, they're undefeated. Coach Godfrey, Eric Godfrey, I know you know who that guy is. I think young Godfrey, the linebacker at North Gwinnett, he's really good. I really like that guy at North Gwinnett. They're taking on Parkview. Now, Parkview's not having the best season, but Parkview has Cortez Smith, the Georgia interior offensive line commitment, and he's going up against Rutgers commitment, Braxton Kyle, who is on the top targets list, who Georgia has offered, and Georgia's giving him a lot to think about. So for me, out of all the games that have my eye around the state, I can't wait to see the film of Cortez getting a chance to block Braxton Kyle. Because, I mean, Cortez can play up and down the line for Parkview, can play some tackle, can play some guard. Georgia sees him as a center. And I think they're going to have to get him in the middle of the line to try and neutralize a really talented interior defensive lineman in Braxton Kyle.
So it looks like it's about that time. It's time for our weekly staples here on Before the Hedges, starting with our question of the week. I like this week's question. I feel like we have some good candidates. The Before the Hedges question of the week is, which commitment in the class of 2025 could help the Dogs right now? I think it's literally any of the defensive linemen. They're so banged up right now. I mean, even young guys are getting in the rotation so early. I feel like any of the defensive linemen in this class could help.
So there was a lot of questions coming out of that Georgia-Kentucky game, to say the least. And I think this is a really hard question because for me, if I want to sound logical, well, Georgia is going after some special 5-star defensive linemen. Isaiah Gibson is a guy that comes to my mind. And again, the comment section is for you folks. I mean, love to hear what you have to say. I kind of went around to a couple of names. Obviously, Michael Williams is out right now. Isaiah Gibson. Here's a hot take for you guys. I think Isaiah Gibson should probably be top 5 overall in the country type player. I think On3.com just recently re-rated their guys for the class of 2025. I think Isaiah came in at number 7, so I think they're getting closer to the mark, number 7 overall.
Wow, that's a big jump.
And, you know, he's really, really good. And I think he's a guy that affects the passer. He's physical. It seems like he wants to punish anybody that comes his way. I think he can set the edge in the run game as well. He's one guy I think of. And to be honest, this question, if we're answering it correctly, it's going to be a very small sample size because we're talking about high school seniors with, I guess, now the number 2 team in the land and the probably still pound for pound, up and down, the best roster in college football. I think of a name like Elias Williams, the tight end at Camden. And let's face it, no disrespect to Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky, Benjamin Urasic, who didn't have his best game against Kentucky on Saturday, Jaden Riddell, Colton Heinrich, some really good tight ends at Georgia. But I think Georgia might be suffering a little bit of not having a big bad wolf at tight end or just like that incredible playmaker. I think Elias Williams could potentially help this team right now just because of the fact of his size, his athleticism. I mean, some folks in scouting circles, I have this conversation in text messages all the time where a lot of people I talk to think that, you know what, you wouldn't be stupid if you just said, hey, Elias Williams, go play X receiver. Because I think he could do it. I think he could be the matchup nightmare. I think he could get down the field fast enough, and then he can go up and get the ball. And I think Elias Williams, that's sort of just game breaker at tight end. Maybe that's kind of the security blanket that Carson Beck is having to adjust to early right now. in the 2024 season when he doesn't really have that go-to guy yet. Like I said earlier in the show, I think Georgia has a lot of, 8.5 receivers, but I don't know if they have that 9.5, that 10.0, like future first rounder. And I think although Georgia has a lot of talent, perhaps more talent than they've ever had at receiver, they just don't have that guy that's that guy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, DawgNation, let us know what you think in the comments. And if you're listening to us on the DawgNation podcast feed, put your answer on Twitter and tag @DawgNation so we can get all of your answers. Now it's time for our class breakdown. We'll go through the offense and defense pretty quick just because there haven't been any changes to this list, but you've seen a lot of these guys on our viral class plays. This is our 2025 class breakdown offense. Of course, Ryan Montgomery out, season-ending injury. Bo Walker's going to play high school football. Landon Roldan absolutely murdering it right now. Jeff, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I feel like we're doing good when some of our viral clips. I mean, the DawgNation folks out there should feel good when all these playmakers are showing up on your viral clips. I mean, if we had crickets and we had nothing going on with these receivers and I was fine, Kaylee and I were just pulling out a bunch of sacks or a bunch of running back plays, that wouldn't bode well for the future of the Georgia offense right there. And you see there, we mentioned Williams. Barbour is just a couple of weeks removed from being a Dawg of the week himself. So it's a lot of good stuff there on offense.
All right, let's look at our class breakdown on defense. It's just so funny that Todd Robinson, our Dawg of the month, was a quarterback, and here we are looking at him on the defensive slide.
Everybody wonders about, I think if you ask a lot of Dawg fans, they're still, I would say, enamored with the fact of getting that dual threat quarterback that can run, make plays, especially in the red zone when you have a quarterback to defend with legs. But that guy, Kaylee, I'm sure you know this. I want to refresh it in folks' memory. He's doing so great as a quarterback, but Josh Crawford was instrumental in recruiting him, and people originally thought when Georgia offered him, he was offering him as a running back because he was such a great running quarterback last year. But you talked to Todd, one of the first things he told me when he got the offer and we had our interview was he's like, man, I want to be a DB. I don't want to be a running back. I want to be a DB because that's where he thinks his longest professional life is right there. And I'm down with any high school football player that has the insight and already the vision to realize that, I don't need the ball in my hands. I need to play 10 years in the league and have generational wealth for my family. Defensive lineman, the tree right there on defense looks a little light. That's going to change. Jalon Walker, Isaiah Gibson, we mentioned him earlier. Shamari Earls is a very interesting piece of this class that I think folks don't talk about enough.
All right, let's look at our recruiting snapshot. 21 commits, 4th in the country, has not changed in recent weeks. 12 on offense, 9 on defense, 8 out of state, 13 in-state. We've got 3 5-star commits at the moment and 7 in the top 100. Also, still state with the most recruits. You love to see it, the state of Georgia with 13. Now let's go ahead and look at our top targets.
You got 11. You see him sinking there, Kaylee.
I do. Usmani, Chroma, moved down the list a little bit, but that's okay. Things happen on top targets. 7 Cloud, moving up.
Moving up, I want to tell you, if you didn't see that story on DawgNation.com, 7 Cloud, it was almost like he just told me the real. He said, dude, I've never decommitted from Georgia. When I was trying to get back and get eligible for college football, I thought about playing for Georgia. Georgia has offered him now, and he basically said, man, Georgia pushes anybody that's offered me right now. I don't see them hanging with Georgia, and that's pretty interesting to hear that from even a junior college recruit. Usman Chroma has fallen. You know where he was at while we were having so much fun in Lexington, Kentucky?
Give me Auburn for 100.
Yeah, give you Auburn. Well, maybe give you Auburn for $1 million if we're talking about the way Hugh Freeze is pulling players. But with that NIL and that collective effort right there, but he drops a little bit because that's just not really good news for anybody except everybody that's not War Eagle when it come to Mr. Chroma. Talented player. Him taking 2 visits in the span of about 3 weeks, that's really, we can kind of see the breadcrumbs right there in the old adage for recruiting. Look at him dancing right there. That's pretty funny. Follow the visits, and especially follow visits back-to-back to Auburn. He's told folks that he's going to make his commitment on September the 28th, so it's coming around the corner. I know Kaylee Mansell is now circling that date on her calendar right there.
Who says it already wasn't?
Oh, who says it already wasn't? There you go, Kaylee. I stand corrected. Kevin Wynn, we're going to write about him this week on DawgNation.com. Jeremiah McLeod, obviously, he's going to be committed to a staff that probably won't be there much longer in Florida on our first side. Again, I think it's really interesting, Jamari Medlock. Again, he's committed to Cincinnati to play offensive tackle out of Riverdale. Charles Drew, but Georgia and Trey Scott has now offered him as a defensive lineman.
So let's go ahead and look at the second page of our top targets. Now, for those that you see that have other schools by them, if you missed it, make sure to check out our Before the Hedges from last week. We did it all about potential flips, but the top three stay the same. Chase Linton, Justice Terry, and Elijah Griffin, who we had that Dawg Nation conversation with early. Let's go ahead and take a look at our just off the list. Almost made it, not quite. Any changes?
Yeah, I want to bring some insight and just kind of spotlight Anthony Carra out of Marietta High School. Currently a North Carolina commit, but I think, you know, if there's a Schumann special, perhaps it's Anthony Carra right there out of Marietta. You know, I don't believe in any scenario, in any model that Georgia will just take one linebacker in this class. Currently they have the 5-star Jalon Walker. Christian Ingram's very interesting out of Newton High School as well. Tay Harris, I think there are some fires burning there with Georgia and Clemson. I wouldn't call them a major fire right now, but it's something to at least monitor.
All right, and taking a look at our next page just off the list, I can't help my eyes go to C.J. Wiley. I know he's at the bottom for a specific kind of reason, but I mean, what has happened with FSU is just inexcusable at this point. Watching them go 0-3, I don't know. I mean, no tea, no shade. I just don't know how any recruit committed or being recruited can be excited about what's to come or the development that they could potentially get. That's just my TED Talk.
Good TED Talk, Kaylee. Certainly the chances of Georgia pulling the flip or even Auburn pulling the flip go up with every time that Fear the Spear stuff doesn't really play well on national television. Here's a name. We just mentioned Usman and how the chances are dimming a little bit. Let's pay attention a little bit closer to Shane Marshall right now out of Irwin County. I don't think he still has publicized the Georgia offer he has received yet, so we'll wait and see when he feels comfortable about doing that. But Shane Marshall tearing it up there for Osceola, and he's currently committed to Minnesota. But I think that especially if, you know, things trend the way they're going with Georgia's other running back targets in this class, you hear a little bit of noise lately again about Anthony Turbo Rogers right now out of the state of Alabama, currently committed to the Tide. But I think the Marshall plan might heat up in a couple weeks.
That is our just off the list. I want to start ending the show this way because I feel like you're a pretty wise guy. I'll give that to you. To end Before the Hedges, give us your Jeff's final thought, whether that be for anybody that we just saw in top targets or just off the list, maybe a little bit of advice or something to tell people going to the bye week. What does Dawg Nation need to know from you, Jeff Sentell?
You want to hear some Sentelligence, huh? Is that what you want to hear?
Sentelligence. So quick with it.
You know what I would say? I would say just pay attention to Georgia's roster. Again, look what's going to happen. I think Georgia will lose, and it was tough news hearing about Tate Ratledge, but I think it's going to help a guy, help Georgia maybe figure out their offensive line rotation. I was paying close attention to Monroe Freeling on Saturday night in Kentucky. You got to go back and watch the games as much as the Dawg Nation team does. But Freeling was in there for that touchdown drive when Georgia got a short field and they punched it in with Branson Robinson. He was very animated. He was playing the left tackle. I think if you're watching film, you're paying attention to Georgia these days, you see a little bit of struggles there with who I think is probably the most technically sound offensive lineman on the Georgia team, which is Ernest Green. And now you're going to get Micah Morris rolled in a little bit more for playing time. Dylan Fairchild, to me, is playing like a top 100 NFL draft pick. I'm so happy to see his career progressing that way. But what I mean by this overarching thought right here is Georgia's going to basically clean house. I think it enhances the chances for Micah Morris to get NFL film, to go high in the draft. I think Georgia might lose 5, maybe 6 linemen, counting Xavier Truss, the super senior, off the offensive line. And then, of course, we all always have to end this with some defensive line thoughts. And, again, Georgia can never have enough defensive linemen, especially because of the attrition and those bloody Tuesdays in the program. I think Georgia would have loved to win into that Kentucky game with at least 2 or 3 healthier defensive linemen. I mean, Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins played like 70 snaps against Kentucky. Kaylee, that's way, way, way too much, especially a guy like Nazir Stackhouse as well. So defensive linemen and offensive linemen and receivers, those are the 3 buzzwords for this 2025 class.
DawgNation, that's your Sentelligence. This is Before the Hedges. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Jeff Sentell. We'll see you right back here next Wednesday. Big week, 7 o'clock on all DawgNation video channels.
Let's go, I'm a bulldog. So Georgia, who I'm picking. I love the family atmosphere and the way they handle business. Education is